From the very moment we're born, even before we really have a name or anything whispered about us, something profoundly shapes our path. Gender. It just weaves its way into, well, everything. Our lives, the colors may be painted on our nursery walls, the clothes we're put in, the toys.
Right, the first things we're given.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And fundamentally how the whole world interacts with us. It's not just, a biological tag.
No, not at all.
It's a cornerstone of how societies work. And for us personally, a huge part of who we think we are.
Absolutely. It shapes so much.
So today we're embarking on a really fascinating and I think crucial deep dive. We're looking into gender identity development.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And we're going to explore this intricate process mainly through the lens of social cognitive theory.
A very powerful lens for this topic.
Our mission really is to unpack how our understanding of gender forms, how it impacts our lives, and, interestingly, how it can even change over time.
The transformation aspect is key.
And maybe most importantly, what all of this actually means for you listening in, especially if you happen to be an educator or maybe just someone really curious about, the layers of human identity, how we become ourselves.
That's absolutely right. And for this deep dive, we're leaning heavily on a really extensive chapter. It's on gender identity development from the Handbook of Identity Theory and Research.
Okay, so solid academic grounding.
Oh, definitely. It gives this profound analysis, not just how we develop ideas about gender, but then how those ideas influence our behavior.
How they guide us.
Exactly. Through all these motivational and self-regulatory processes, it's like a roadmap showing how gender isn't just something we have, it's something we actively do and sort of become.
And for you, our listener, especially if maybe you're studying elementary education or child development, psychology, that kind of thing,
Right.
understanding this stuff isn't just, academic.
No, far from it.
It's genuinely crucial, right? Think about it.
Yeah.
It's the foundation for building truly inclusive classrooms.
Absolutely vital.
For helping kids develop healthy, authentic ideas about themselves. And for spotting those subtle but really powerful influences that affect every single student.
It helps you understand the why behind what kids do.
Exactly. Not just the what, but the why. And maybe even more powerfully, how you as an educator can step in positively and, help broaden their horizons.
Yeah. Provide more options, more possibilities.
So, okay, to really dig into this, I think we need to start with the basics. Get on the same page about some key words.
Good idea. Terminology matters here.
We hear gender and gender identity used a lot, sometimes, meaning the same thing. But the source material makes a really important distinction, doesn't it? A nuanced one.
It really does, and it's a critical starting point. Historically, the term sex was typically used for the biological differences.
Right, chromosomes, anatomy, hormones, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And gender was kept for the socially influenced differences, the roles, behaviors, the things a culture says are masculine or feminine.
Okay, that sounds straightforward enough.
Well, yes, but our source material points out that this neat binary split, it's actually increasingly tricky to maintain in reality.
Oh, why that?
Because there's just so much evidence now suggesting that most differences we see between men and women are this complex mix.
A mix of biology and social factors.
Precisely. Constantly interacting. So for that reason, the chapter we're looking at today deliberately uses the broader term gender.
To cover both aspects.
Exactly. It acknowledges that interplay without jumping to conclusions about whether something is purely biological or purely social. It encourages looking at the whole picture.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about something like spatial ability. That knack for visualizing things in space. Often assumed to be, mostly biological, maybe stronger in males.
Right, that's a common stereotype.
But research, mentioned in the handbook, shows that even these differences can be significantly changed or attenuated, as the source says, through experience and specific training.
So practice can actually change spatial ability.
Yes, quite significantly. This is a huge point, especially for educators, isn't it? It challenges that fixed idea that certain skills are just set at birth based on gender.
Yeah, it suggests potential is more malleable.
Exactly. What we often see as just biology might actually be heavily influenced by the opportunities kids get or don't get.
Okay, so how does social cognitive theory view gender identity itself then?
Well, from this perspective, gender identity is seen as a totally integral part of a person's wider sense of self, their personal identity.
Part of the bigger picture of who I am.
Right. And what's really crucial here, and maybe different from some older views, is that identity formation is not seen as fixed.
Oh, not set in stone, it's some.
No. It's described as an ongoing, dynamic process, something that actively transforms and develops across our whole life.
Wow, okay, so it keeps evolving.
It does. And within that, gender identity is seen as one of the most pervasive, most enduring aspects of who we are, both personally and socially. It influences our goals, our dreams, the paths we end up taking.
That's a powerful way to frame it, an ongoing journey. It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it?
It does, away from something static.
But I guess some listeners might be thinking, okay, how does this actually work in real life? And, before we dive deep only into social cognitive theory, it's probably helpful to know it's not the only theory out there, right?
Oh, absolutely not. The landscape is really rich and diverse.
Different theories look at it from different angles.
Exactly. Some focus more on individual traits, others on social structures or specific life stages. Each adds a piece to this complex puzzle. It's good to have that context.
Okay, so let's touch on some of those other perspectives briefly.
Sounds good. First, you have perspectives from humanistic social science and sociology. These often emphasize masculinities and femininities, not as internal traits, but as products of social structures.
So society shapes these ideas.
Yes, and importantly, power differences within society. A key concept here is doing gender.
Doing gender, what does that mean?
It's the idea, proposed by West and Zimmerman, that gender differences aren't about what you are biologically, but what you do, the social performances.
Like acting out roles.
Exactly. Actions we engage in that signal, male or female, based on social expectations. And they argue these performances are often based on unequal power relations, not some preordained biology.
Okay, how might a teacher see doing gender in a classroom?
All the time. Think about free play. You might see some boys feeling they have to be really strong and competitive in a game, maybe rougher than necessary.
Right, performing boy.
Or you might see girls automatically taking on nurturing roles in the play kitchen, caring for dolls. This theory says these aren't just innate preferences, they're learned performances.
Learned ways of doing girl or boy.
Precisely. Reinforced by what they see, what's expected. It challenges us to see gender as an action, not just a label.
That's a useful lens. And feminist scholars have debated this stuff too, right?
Oh, extensively. Some focus on valuing traditionally feminine traits like nurturing that have been historically undervalued. Others argue for fundamentally changing patriarchal structures in society, like in the family, to dismantle inequality.
Different approaches to the same issue.
Yes. And importantly, a lot of research now shows huge gender similarities in many areas and lots of diversity within so-called masculine or feminine identities.
So the categories aren't that neat.
Not at all, which really questions linking these social roles too tightly to biology. It's easy to justify inequality if you assume it's all just natural.
Got it. Okay, what about psychological perspective? They focus more on the individual.
Generally, yes, on internal processes. A classic one is Kohlberg's developmental theory.
I've heard of that one.
It was foundational. Kohlberg said gender identity is central. Kids first learn to label themselves, I'm a boy, she's a girl.
Okay, basic labeling.
Then, around age 5 to 7, they get gender constancy. The understanding that gender is stable, it doesn't change if you wear different clothes or play different games.
So a boy in a dress is still a boy.
Exactly. And Kohlberg thought this understanding was the main driver for kids acting in gender stereotyped ways. They want to be consistent with their fixed gender.
But there were criticisms of that, weren't there?
Yes, significant ones. It doesn't explain why gendered behavior varies so much in older kids and adults. And, crucially, research shows kids have strong gendered preferences long before they grasp gender constancy.
So the behavior comes first sometimes.
Often, yes. A 3-year-old might insist on boy toys even if they don't fully get that their gender is permanent. So constancy isn't the only motivator.
Okay. What other psychological theories are there?
Another big one is gender schema theory. This suggests that once kids label themselves, that label becomes like an organizing principle.
A filter.
Kind of. They develop these mental frameworks or schemas about gender. What do boys do? What do girls like?
And they use these schemas to guide their actions.
Exactly. They're motivated to act in ways consistent with their schema because it feels right, it makes sense cognitively.
So a kid with a girl schema might avoid the blocks and go straight for the art supplies.
Precisely. They might even actively avoid things they perceive as not for their gender, reinforcing their own schema. You could see that very clearly in a classroom during free choice time.
Yeah, you really could.
Bem's version emphasized individual differences and how much people rely on these schemas. She measured masculinity, femininity using personality traits, instrumental versus expressive.
Like independent versus nurturing.
Right. But critics like Spence question if these traits really capture the whole concept of masculinity or femininity.
Because it's more than just personality.
Exactly. Lay people think about roles, appearance, interests. It's much broader than just those traits. So Bem's measures might be more about gendered personality attributes.
Okay, interesting distinction. Any others?
Briefly, there's social identity theory and self-categorization theory. These focus on identifying with social groups.
Like identifying as a girl or a boy, as a group member.
Yes. And this identification leads to liking your own group, maybe even favoring it. Self-categorization adds that which group identity is active depends on the situation.
So sometimes age is key, sometimes gender.
Right. But these theories don't fully explain why we adopt certain aspects of the group identity or how it develops over a lifetime.
More focused on the now.
Exactly. And finally, you have multi-dimensional approaches. These see gender identity as having multiple parts.
Like feeling compatible with your gender, feeling pressure to conform.
Yes, things like that. Plus, awareness of your gender, maybe bias towards your own gender group. They list the components.
But maybe don't explain the development so well.
That's the main critique. They offer a good snapshot of what gender identity is at a point in time, but less about how it got there or how it changes.
Wow, okay. That's a really rich landscape of ideas.
It absolutely is. It shows the complexity.
And it really highlights why social cognitive theory stands out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it tries to bring together the personal and the social across the whole lifespan.
Precisely. It offers a more comprehensive, dynamic framework that integrates insights from many of these other approaches while addressing some of their limitations.
Okay, so let's dive deep then. What does social cognitive theory tell us? Because this feels like where it gets really practical, showing how identity isn't just fixed, but something we actively build and even reshape.
Exactly. It's a profoundly empowering view. At its heart, social cognitive theory says identity formation is central to human agency.
Agency meaning our ability to act intentionally.
Yes, we're not just passively shaped by our environment. We actively direct our lives using foresight, planning ahead, and cognitive self-regulation, managing our thoughts, feelings, actions.
Okay.
So gender identity is part of that broader self-concept. And crucially, it's not just dictated by biology or environment. Individuals are active agents, constantly constructing and transforming their identity throughout life.
We're involved in making ourselves.
Very much so. And the core concept explaining how this happens is triadic reciprocal causation.
Triadic, meaning three parts. Reciprocal, meaning they influence each other.
Exactly. It's not a one-way street. It's a continuous bidirectional loop between three factors: personal, behavioral, and environmental.
Okay, break those down for us.
Sure. Personal contribution, that's everything internal. Biology, yes, but also our self-beliefs, goals, standards, how we regulate ourselves related to gender.
Our inner world.
Right. Then, environmental contribution, that's the vast array of social influences. Parents, peers, media, schools, culture, everything external impacting gender.
The world around us.
And finally, behavioral contribution. This is what we actually do. The patterns of activities, choices, actions related to gender.
Our actions and choices.
Exactly. And the key is they all constantly influence each other.
Can you give an example of that loop in action?
Definitely. Think of a young child, say, a boy. His biological sex, personal, might influence parents choosing blue clothes and trucks, environmental. Those toys then shape his play patterns. He plays with trucks a lot, behavioral.
Okay, makes sense so far.
But then that behavior playing with boy toys feeds back. It reinforces his developing self-concept as a boy, what boys do, personal again.
Ah, so it loops back and strengthens the personal identity.
Precisely. It's a continuous dynamic dance.
And for educators, understanding this interaction is, well, it seems really powerful.
It really is. It offers clear points for intervention. Think about a student, maybe a girl, who believes, I'm bad at math. That's a personal factor, a limiting belief.
Okay.
Maybe it comes from past struggles, behavioral, or perhaps subtle messages at home or even in previous classrooms, environmental.
Right.
That belief then affects her effort in math class, her willingness to even try hard problems, behavioral again, creating this negative cycle.
Yeah, you see that
But
happen.
knowing the triadic model helps you see where to step in. You could change the environment, make math more collaborative, use different activities,
Make it feel safer or more engaging.
or focus on behavior praise effort. Encourage asking questions, celebrate small wins.
Focus on the process, not just the answer.
Exactly. Or you could directly address the personal factor challenge, that limiting belief, show her past successes, introduce role models, foster a growth mindset.
Show her it's not fixed.
Right. The relative strength of these three factors can shift, of course. It depends on the situation, the culture, the specific activity. In societies with very rigid gender roles, personal factors have less wiggle room.
Less choice.
But in many Western societies today, gender roles are changing rapidly. So the influence of gender identity varies more now, depending on context and the individual.
Okay, that model provides a really helpful framework. Now, thinking about development, it's amazing how early this all starts. You said infants are picking up cues even before they can talk.
It's quite incredible, yes.
Yeah.
Long before a formal gender identity exists, in the first year, infants can tell male and female faces apart.
Really? That young?
Uh-huh. And voices, too. By the second year, maybe around 18 months, they often start showing preferences for toys or activities stereotypically linked to their gender.
Wow, before they even really know they're a boy or girl.
Kind of. And by 3, most kids have some awareness of gender stereotypes. Girls often pick up on them a bit earlier, especially around household stuff.
Interesting. But here's a key point you mentioned. These early preferences for, say, trucks versus dolls might not be coming from the child's internal gender concept initially.
That's a crucial insight from the research, yes. It's often more about the parents providing those specific toys and encouraging their use.
So the environment is shaping the behavior very early on.
Very directly. Parents often react approvingly to gender-typical play, good job being strong, and maybe subtly or not so subtly discourage cross-gender play.
Like redirecting a boy from the play kitchen.
Exactly, and there's often an asymmetry here.
Asymmetry, how so?
Parents and society in general tend to disapprove more strongly of cross-gender behavior in boys than in girls.
Ah, the boys don't cry kind of thing.
Precisely. Or that sissy stuff. This stronger pressure often means boys develop stronger preferences for boy things earlier and might be more rigid about it.
That has real implications for the classroom, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When you see those seemingly natural preferences, boys in blocks, girls with dolls, remember how much might be shaped by that early gendered environment and parental reactions.
Right. It's not necessarily just innate.
Probably not entirely.
Yeah.
So as an educator, it highlights why it's so important to consciously offer a wide range of toys and activities.
And encourage everyone to explore everything.
Yes. Boys nurturing dolls, girls building complex structures. You're actively challenging those early, often unconscious biases and broadening their sense of what's possible for them. You're shaping self-efficacy from day one.
So the actual gender identity, the self-recognition, starts to form later.
It really kicks in when kids recognize themselves, often around 18 months, maybe in a mirror, and language development fuels it hearing and using boy and girl.
Okay.
But interestingly, kids often know a lot about gender stereotypes and have preferences before they can reliably label their own gender consistently.
The knowledge comes before the label solidifies.
Often, yes. But by age 3, most can label others, label themselves, and know quite a few stereotypes. That internal schema is building.
And then there's a shift towards groups.
Yes, a big shift. Around preschool age, kids start forming play groups, mostly with others of their own gender. This gender segregation actually increases through childhood.
Wow, it gets stronger.
It does. And these peer groups become incredibly important arenas for learning gender roles, skills, norms.
Learning from each other.
Massively. They start realizing, okay, if I act this way, other boys react like this, or girls expect that. They anticipate reactions based on group membership.
You see that on the playground all the time, the separate groups.
Definitely. Girls may be talking on the swings, boys in a running game, and within those groups, gender-typed behavior gets reinforced.
Like kids telling each other, boys don't do that.
Exactly. Understanding that powerful peer influence helps you, as the teacher, think about how to mix things up.
Like creating mixed gender groups for projects.
Perfect example. Or interest-based clubs, coding, nature, art open to everyone. It provides alternative social spaces that can counter that segregation and broaden perspectives.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if gender identity is this active, learned thing, How does it actually guide our choices? What's the engine driving us to act in gendered ways? It feels deeper than just preference.
It absolutely is. Social cognitive theory gives us three main engines or processes that regulate this, and they shift over time from more external control to more internal self-control.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is gender-related social sanctions. This is all about the external world.
What other people do or say?
Right. Early on, kids learn to anticipate social outcomes. Praise, criticism, acceptance, rejection for doing things based on their gender.
How to learn that?
Through direct experience getting praised or told off.
Yeah.
Through direct instruction, don't do that, it's for girls. And really importantly, just by watching what happens to others.
Observing consequences.
Exactly. If they see another boy get teased for playing dolls, the message is crystal clear without anyone saying a word to them.
And that asymmetry for boys is strong here too.
Very much so. Research shows even other kids sanction boys more harshly for cross-gender behavior, and fathers are often noted as being particularly strong enforcers with sons.
So in class, a boy might avoid ballet club not because he dislikes dance, but because he fears the social fallout.
Precisely. He anticipates the negative sanctions. Or a girl gets praised for being helpful and quiet, reinforcing those stereotypical expectations. Your role as an educator is huge here, either reinforcing those sanctions or actively challenging them.
Through our own reactions and the classroom climate.
Absolutely. Okay, the second process gains strength as kids internalize these messages. Gender self-sanctions.
So this is moving inward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, conduct is regulated less by others' reactions and more by internalized personal standards.
Our own sense of what's right for our gender.
Exactly. Leading to self-approval if we meet those standards, or self-criticism if we violate them. Acting in line with these internalized standards actually feels good. It promotes well-being.
It feels right to us.
It does. And this self-regulation involves 3 steps. First, self-monitoring. Becoming aware of gender's importance and watching our own behavior through that lens.
Kids checking themselves.
Boys, facing those tougher sanctions, often become more vigilant self-monitors regarding gender. Then comes self-judgment. Comparing our behavior to our internal standard. Did I act like a proper boy-girl?
Okay.
And finally, self-evaluation. Reacting with that internal pride or guilt, self-approval or self-censure. That feeling then shapes future actions.
Can you give a classroom example of self-sanctions?
Sure. Imagine a girl who's absorbed the subtle message that math is for boys. She internalizes a standard that she's not meant to be good at it.
Okay.
If she struggles with a problem, she might experience intense self-criticism, seeing it as a proof she can't do it even if she tried hard. That self-censure makes her want to avoid math.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Often, yes. Or a boy feels internal pressure to be tough, so he beats himself up internally if he cries or shows vulnerability in class. Understanding these internal judges helps you support kids in challenging those limiting standards.
Help them build more realistic or flexible standards.
Exactly. Now, the third regulator is incredibly important. Regulatory self-efficacy beliefs.
Self-efficacy. That's about believing you can do something, right?
Precisely. It's your belief in your ability to perform specific gender-related actions successfully. It's fundamental. If you don't believe you can, you likely won't even try, let alone persist.
So it determines whether we even attempt things.
Absolutely. It's a gatekeeper. And this self-efficacy comes from 4 main sources. The most powerful is mastery experiences.
Actually succeeding at something.
Yes. Nothing builds confidence like success. Kids often get more practice and thus achieve mastery in gender-typical activities because that's what's encouraged and available.
Like if schools only offered gender-stereotype sports.
Perfect example. Boys master football. Girls master cheerleading, reinforcing that specific efficacy. But if a child masters something non-traditional, a girl rocks robotics, a boy nails baking, that builds powerful efficacy against the stereotype.
It opens doors in their mind.
It really does.
Okay.
The second source is vicarious experiences, seeing others succeed.
Learning by watching.
Especially watching people similar to you, like same-gender role models. If a school brings in female engineers or male nurses to talk.
Kids see possibilities. They did it, maybe I can too.
Exactly. It challenges stereotypes and boosts efficacy for paths they might not have considered.
Makes sense. What's the third source?
Social persuasion. Basically, encouragement or discouragement from others.
What people tell us about our abilities.
Right. And this can be so powerful, positively or negatively. A teacher carelessly saying, "Oh, girls sometimes find this tricky," can crush a girl's math efficacy.
Wow, yeah. Words matter.
Immensely.
Right.
But conversely, a teacher saying, "You've got this, keep practicing," can be a huge confidence booster. It builds belief.
Okay, and the last source.
Physiological and emotional states. How we feel physically and emotionally impacts our efficacy beliefs.
Like being anxious or stressed.
Exactly. High anxiety can make you feel less capable, even if you're not. Research shows girls often report more anxiety in science, even if their grades are good.
And they might interpret that anxiety as meaning they aren't competent.
Precisely. It becomes a misleading signal.
Right.
So, creating calm, supportive classrooms, highlighting diverse scientists, mentoring,
Yep.
these things can reduce that anxiety and protect their self-efficacy.
Helping them read their feelings more accurately.
Yes. And the more central gender is to someone's identity, the bigger the gap tends to be in their self-efficacy for own gender versus other gender tasks.
Someone with a very traditional identity might feel much less capable attempting something non-traditional.
It's likely, yes. The belief barrier is higher.
That's a really clear picture of the internal drivers. So turning back outward, who are the big players shaping all this? Shaping our self-sanctions, our efficacy beliefs? Our sources point to three main social forces, right?
Yeah. They do. Social cognitive theory really emphasizes that parents, peers, and media are huge influences. They shape gender identity through modeling, through enactive experiences, learning, by doing and seeing consequences, and through direct teaching.
Okay, let's start with parents. Foundational, right?
Absolutely. It starts even before birth. Sometimes room colors, clothes, names, all chosen based on expected gender.
Setting the stage.
Exactly. Then parents provide gender-typed toys and activities. They also model different roles and behaviors. Kids see mom doing certain things, dad doing others.
Learning by watching them.
And they use as evaluative reactions. We talked about praise for gender-appropriate stuff, maybe discouragement for cross-gender stuff, especially for boys.
And direct instruction, too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Explicitly labeling things. That's a boy's toy. Girls help set the table. Fathers are often noted as being particularly strong enforcers of these rules with sons.
Wow. And there's subtle messages, too, about abilities.
Yes, and these are incredibly powerful. Parents often, maybe unconsciously, underestimate daughters' abilities in math or sports while overestimating sons.
Even if the kid's actual performance doesn't match.
Often, yes. And research shows girls' own beliefs about their math ability can actually decline over time to match those lower expectations from parents and teachers.
That's worrying. It affects their future choices.
Hugely. It impacts self-efficacy, college majors, careers. But the good news is, the source also notes that in more egalitarian families, girls are more likely to excel in math and science.
So the whole environment makes a big difference.
Immense. Parental encouragement is critical for building efficacy, especially in fields not traditionally associated with one's gender. As a teacher, understanding these home influences helps you support kids who might be battling limiting beliefs absorbed from home.
Maybe work with parents to promote a growth mindset.
That would be ideal. Okay, next up, peer influences. These become huge as kids get older.
That gender segregation you mentioned.
Exactly. Middle childhood is marked by kids playing mostly with their own gender. This creates this intense learning environment for gender norms
The testing ground.
and a reinforcing one. The more time spent with same-gender peers, often the more gender-typed kids become. And the social cost of not conforming can be really high.
Especially for boys, you said. Teasing, exclusion.
Yes, peer sanctions can be brutal. But kids aren't just passive victims here either. They have agency.
How so?
They can actively choose peer groups that support their interests, even non-traditional ones. Think of girls forming a math club or a science group.
Finding like-minded friends.
Exactly. Creating supportive niches where they can build skills and confidence away from mainstream peer pressure. In class, you can facilitate this by creating those mixed-gender cooperative groups or diverse clubs we talked about.
Provide alternative spaces for connection.
Precisely. Okay, finally, media influences. These are everywhere.
TV, movies, internet, games.
All of it. And despite some progress, media still often portrays males and females in very stereotypical ways.
In terms of jobs, personality, appearance.
Yes, women are often still underrepresented in powerful roles, or sometimes objectified.
And this impacts kids' aspirations.
Research suggests it does. One study showed that just seeing stereotypical TV ads made women perform worse on a math test afterwards and feel less interested in STEM careers.
Wow, just from ads.
Yes. And people whose gender identity is very central to them might actively seek out more stereotypical media, creating a reinforcing loop.
They consume media that confirms their existing identity.
It seems so. Though the internet does offer more diverse content too, so people can find alternative representations if they look.
So for teachers, media literacy is key.
Absolutely crucial. Helping kids see the stereotypes, question them. Who gets to do what in this show? Is that realistic? Is it fair?
Make them critical viewers.
And showcase diverse media examples. Show female scientists, male artists, characters defying norms. It broadens their horizons and challenges the stereotypes they absorb constantly.
That gives us a really clear picture of the forces at play. But here's the part I find most hopeful. This idea that gender identity isn't fixed.
Yes.
The source really emphasizes that it's not set in stone. Individuals and even whole societies can actively transform it. How does that incredible process happen?
This is where the theory feels really dynamic and optimistic. Gender identity evolves across our lives, influenced by those motivators, social sanctions, self-sanctions, self-efficacy. Personal change happens through reflection on our experiences, and as society itself changes.
And kids start reflecting quite early.
Surprisingly early.
Yeah.
By age 5, many kids notice that genders are treated differently, that there are power imbalances. Girls often become aware of this sooner than boys.
And that awareness can spark change.
It can trigger reflection. Why is it like this? Is this fair? Thinking about their own experiences of belonging to a gender group.
And then there's individual agency. We aren't just products of society.
Exactly. We can create or choose environments that support who we want to be. Remember those women in science seeking out supportive peers and mentors.
Right, actively shaping their environment.
Yes. They didn't just accept the status quo. They built structures to help them succeed and develop their identity in a non-traditional field.
And it's not just individual action, is it? There's collective power, too.
Absolutely. Collective agency or collective self-efficacy. The belief that you can work together with others in your group, in this case, gender group, to achieve goals.
Like social movements.
Precisely. Think of the suffragettes fighting for the vote, or the women's movement in the 60s demanding equal rights, access to education, challenging discrimination.
People working together make huge changes.
Immense changes. Sharing stories of collective action in the classroom is so powerful. It teaches kids about history, yes, but also about their own potential to work together to create a better future. It models agency.
And we're seeing societal roles changing now, too, aren't we?
Definitely. More men are involved in childcare, challenging traditional masculinity. More women are in leadership, in diverse jobs, even the military. That strict separation of roles is breaking down.
The lines are blurring.
They are. Look at sports since Title IX in the U.S. Girls' participation skyrocketed. That shows how laws and attitudes can fundamentally change what activities are seen as belonging to one gender.
Yeah. That's a dramatic example.
Showing kids pictures of female athletes in all kinds of sports challenges those old assumptions directly. It opens up their sense of possibility.
So as these roles blur, does gender identity become less important?
Not necessarily less important personally, but perhaps less pervasive in dictating life choices. As segregation lessens, gender doesn't have to control how people react to you, how you react to yourself, or what skills you develop.
More freedom to be an individual, rather than just a category member.
That's the idea. It also involves challenging biological essentialism, that idea that biology is destiny.
Right. You mentioned the brain is malleable.
Exactly. Even if there are slight biological predispositions, developing skills associated with the other gender can actually change brain function. Nurturance, for instance, can be seen as a human value, not just a female one.
So fostering a growth mindset is key here, too.
Absolutely. Emphasizing that abilities grow with practice, regardless of gender. Encouraging empathy, problem-solving, creativity in all students as valuable human skills, not boy skills or girl skills.
It's about fostering human potential, really.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So, wow, we've covered a huge amount today, journeying through how gender identity forms, how it guides us, and crucially, how it can change. It's definitely not a fixed point, is it? It's this dynamic dance.
That's it, exactly. It's a collective category influenced by society interacting with biology. Its power varies by culture, by individual self-regulation and agency. But even when things seem restrictive, collective action shows change is always possible.
And for you listening, especially if you're heading into education or just fascinated by identity, this deep dive offers really practical insights, I think. It's about seeing those invisible forces, shaping your students, and empowering them, not just to learn stuff, but to define themselves authentically, to write their own stories.
To choose paths free from old constraints. Which really leaves us with a vital question, doesn't it, for all of us, but maybe especially for educators. How can understanding this dynamic, fluid, changeable nature of gender identity empower us to build truly equitable, truly inclusive learning spaces.
Yeah, spaces where every single child feels capable.
Capable, encouraged, and completely free to follow any interest, any passion, any path they dream of without being boxed in by outdated gender norms.
How do we actively help them shape their own identities?
Yes. How can we actively facilitate their agency? What small things can we change in our classrooms, in our language, in our expectations every single day to help make that empowering vision a reality for every child?